what is there between thoughts and impressions? Well, impressions are a type of thought, but I'm thinking that in the question when they say impressions that they probably mean sanskaras. When we speak about the impressions upon us, if I say, oh, I don't have a very good impression of that person, that's a thought. It's a judgment. It's simplistic and in separation. But when we speak about the impression that sanskaras create, so that's different. So let's take the question like that, because I'm assuming that that's what the questioner intends. A thought comes and goes. And we know this because when you meditate, thoughts come. But if you jump on the thought and you allow that thought to carry you, you're no longer meditating. So it looks like one moment you're meditating, and then the next minute you're in Paris, or you're in New York, or you're in LA, or you're back in your childhood, or you're somewhere not only other than the present moment, but you are somewhere many, many thoughts down the line. So for example, you're meditating, the stomach grumbles, makes its noise. The thought comes, I'm hungry. The thought doesn't come, Paris. The thought comes, I'm hungry. But if you jump on the thought, and you allow yourself to be carried by it, it goes, I'm hungry. I wonder what's for breakfast. God, I remember that croissant I ate in Paris. That was really good. God, I wonder whether I'm going to get a croissant here. Paris was really nice. I wonder when I'm going to go back to Paris. So we're 10 thoughts already down the line from, I'm hungry. But I'm no longer meditating. I'm in Paris now. If I'm focused on my meditation, the moment that first thought comes that says, I'm hungry, instead of jumping on, I wonder what's for breakfast. I wonder if I'll get a croissant. Yet, instead of that, I just bring the mind back. The moment it says, I'm hungry, I recognize that's a thought. The moment I realize I'm having a thought, instead of jumping on it and allowing it to carry me down, I simply bring the mind back. Bring it back to the breath, back to my mantra, back to whatever I'm meditating on. So thoughts are very, very quick. I describe them frequently when we're meditating as clouds that are blowing across a blue sky. So if you're lying on your back and you're looking up at the sky and a cloud comes by, well, there's 2 ways to do it. One way is to attach your attention into the cloud and to follow that cloud all the way. The other way is to keep the attention on the blue sky, and the clouds just pass. When we're meditating, we keep the awareness on the blue sky, and those clouds are the thoughts that just blow across our consciousness. And it doesn't matter what the thought may be. A lot of times, say you're meditating, mind wanders. Instead of bringing it back, the thought comes, you're worthless at this. You're not even a good meditator. See, I told you you'd never be able to do this. This is stupid. I'm not spiritual. I've never been spiritual. I always was different than spiritual. And again, here we get into analysis. All that happened was the mind wandered. And then you had a very normal thought that's critical, judgmental, happens to all of us. But instead of recognizing that thought for what it is, which is just a passing cloud, a passing wave form, a passing chemical and electrical reaction in the brain, instead of that, I've jumped on it. So a thought is quick and passing. In order for something to become a sanskara, an impression, it has to happen over and over and over and over again. Or it has to happen in a very, very powerful way. And so, for example, in the Hindu tradition, we speak about 16 sanskaras, which are essentially rites of passage. And so it ranges from the first haircut to a sacred thread to the marriage, and ultimately, of course, the last one is the immersion of the ashes. Once you've died, the immersion of the ashes. Now, each of them only happens once. That first haircut is only once. The sacred thread, only once. Marriage, only once, hopefully. But because of the way they're done, because of the depth of the ritual, the impact of the ritual, it goes in very, very deeply. So if we take this piece of metal, and I want to create a groove in the metal, because that's what sanskaras are, is they're grooves, literally. They're grooves in our psyche. Scientifically, you would call that a neuronal network or a neuronal pattern. We call them sanskaras, same thing. It's a groove. It's a way that I work. Now, two different ways to do it. One way is take something, my nail, a key, something sharp, a knife, and over and over and over again in the same place, you keep doing this, and eventually I'm going to get a groove. This is where, on a spiritual level, the gurus and the saints and the sages always remind us, be careful. Be careful of what you do. Be careful of the thoughts you have. Be careful of the behaviors you engage in, because ultimately it's going to become a groove. It's going to become a deep impression, a sanskara upon you. Similarly, scientifically, we talk about neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So if every night in my childhood, when my parents turned off the light, my brother climbed out of his bed and took the baseball bat and beat me, in my brain, dark and pain would wire together. And so as an adult, even though I no longer share a room with my brother, even though no one's beating me with a baseball bat, inexplicably, because maybe I don't even remember that, I'm afraid of the dark. Because those two things have literally wired together. They fired together at the same time enough nights in a row in my childhood that it has literally wired together. Turn off the lights, my heart rate goes up, blood pressure rises, I'm afraid, I don't know why. So whether you talk about this as a sanskara, or you talk about this as a neuronal pattern, either way, just different ways of talking about the same phenomenon. But again, remember, it comes either because it's over and over and over again, or because at one time, maybe it only happened once, but in such a powerful way. So the other way to get a groove here is I could put it on the ground, and from 2 stories up, I could take a sharp rock and drop it on it. Well, I would probably only have to do that once. Coming from 2 stories up, that sharp rock would gather enough force in the fall that when it landed on this, even just one time, it would create a groove. And so the sanskaras that we have come either by repetition or they come by the power of something. And this is why when we talk about the 16 sanskaras and the power of them. But those are just the 16 that are given as very standard sort of rites of passage in a normal person's life. Doesn't happen to everyone. Not everyone gets a sacred thread ceremony. Not everyone gets married. Not everyone gets their hair cut off when they were the first haircut. And of course, if your parents didn't do it for you, you can't go back and recreate the first haircut. But we have the opportunity in our lives to create any sanskar we want. And this is the power of a spiritual path. It's the power of how we think. It's the power of repetition. It's the power of ritual. Whatever impression we want to create in us, we can. And that's the difference between thoughts and impressions, is the thought comes and then it goes. But that sanskara is deeply in me. And some of them are ones we want to get rid of. Some of us come up through childhood perhaps with sanskaras that we don't necessarily want to hold on to. Maybe we come from a family of addiction, or we come from a family of violence, or we come from a family of laziness, whatever it may be, that we come from a family situation in which the sanskaras in us are ones that we didn't consciously bring into our lives, but they came in. Now we find ourselves as adults face to face with a sanskara, an impression that perhaps renders us with an addictive personality, more likely to get addicted, more likely to look to alcohol or drugs or shopping or sex or gambling or whatever it may be to numb our thoughts. Or maybe we have a sanskara toward violence. Maybe we grew up in a home where our mother or our father was violent to us or to each other or to a sibling. So we grow up, we find that we've got this temper that we can't control, that we become violent. Or we find that we repress it inwards, we suppress that, and we become violent to ourselves. So these are things that are not to feel badly about by any means. They're sanskaras we have, they're impressions. Maybe when we were young, some traumatic situation happened in our life that left a deep sanskara. You know, you deal with, for example, children who have been traumatized. These days, as we have got a tragic number of children who are refugees, for example, well, that's a sanskara. They didn't do something. Their government did something, or their, religious bodies did something, or whoever it is in their world that was creating a situation from which their family decided they had to flee. Well, these children, they now have that sanskara, and at some point in their life, that's going to be something that needs to get worked with. But here's the beautiful thing about sanskaras, impressions, or neural networks. So if I've got this impression here, now what happens is, if I've got a groove that runs down this plate, when I take water and I pour water on the plate, where's the water going to go? In the groove, right, exactly. And when every time the water goes in the groove, what's going to happen to the groove? It's going to get filled. Well, it'll be filled temporarily while the water is there, but as the water runs through it, what impact on the groove is the water going to have? It's going to make it deeper, exactly. And then every time I pour more water in, what's going to happen? Keep getting deeper. And this is the same thing with neural networks. And so it's interesting because, for example, I come from the world of psychology, where when I was learning psychology, what we were taught was and there's still some schools that say this, if you are angry, you need to get it out, literally, as though it were a splinter in your foot or some bad food you'd eaten. And it literally was a matter of vomiting it out, digging it out, whatever you needed to do. Scream, shout, hit punching bags, hit pillows, and this was what a lot of cathartic psychology was rooted in, is get that anger out as though it were a disease in you that you could just reach in and get out. And now what we know, interestingly, as we start to learn more about the brain, is you can't get it out. And while you certainly have to acknowledge it honestly, and repression and suppression is never healthy, nonetheless, every temper tantrum you throw is a groove. Which means if every time you feel angry, you decide you need to get it out by screaming, yelling, punching something, whatever it may be, the next time you get angry, you are more likely to throw a temper tantrum, not less. You've actually created a sanskara, a groove. And so far from the ideal of the temper tantrum being something that sort of frees you from anger or inoculates you from getting angry, it actually just makes you more likely to throw a temper tantrum again. And this is where Eastern psychology and spirituality has always said, let it go. Not suppress it, repress it, deny it, none of that. But forgive. Let it go. Move on. Move on. Don't let that groove get created in your psyche. So if I've got the groove, the question then becomes, well, what to do? What a lot of us try to do is to just fill it up. Oh, I've got this groove of anger or sadness or addiction. I'm going to just try to fill it with something. Well, it doesn't work. But what does work is if you come over here and you start laying a different groove, you start creating a different neural pattern. So next time I get angry, I don't throw a temper tantrum, even though I'm way more likely than I used to be because of all the temper tantrums I've thrown. Now it's like the water just wants to go straight into temper tantrum. But no. Now I'm going to lay a new groove that says anger, meditation. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to not suppress it, not deny it, but I'm going to watch it. I'm going to just watch that anger. And I'm going to watch it rise. And I'm going to keep breathing. I'm going to keep focusing on my mantra. I'm not going to attach a story to it or a drama. I'm just going to watch it. Or maybe I'm going to go take a walk. Maybe I'm going to chant, make music. There's not one right thing to do. There's lots of different options of the grooves we can create. But the way to free us of this impression is to create a new one. And once I start doing that, well, now when I pour water down, it could go either way. And the more water that starts coming over here, the deeper this gets. And the deeper this gets, the more likely the water is to come down over here. And slowly, 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 this first one will actually fill up of its own accord. Like a riverbed that a river never runs in anymore. Dry riverbed. Eventually it's going to start to fill. Dirt's going to fill it. Flowers will fill it. Grasses, eventually it no longer will look like a riverbed. Because it'll automatically fill up. And what we now know is that the brain keeps changing. And so whether you think about it from a perspective of sanskaras, or you think about it from a perspective of neural networks, our brain changes. And so whatever pattern I may have, whatever impression I may have, I actually have the ability to change that. And it's not easy. But that's okay. Nobody ever said things were going to be easy. And the rewards are very, very, very powerful. So we get to lay new impressions. Most of the sanskaras we have are ones that were laid beyond our control. Laid by our parents, laid by our family, laid by the culture when we were young, laid by our education system. But now we have the power to say, all right, what sort of sanskaras do I want? What impressions do I want to have? And how am I going to create them? And that's the opportunity we get to have. So that now is in our hands, is to create our own sanskaras. So I'm happy to open it up to any questions that anyone here may have. Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Of course, sure.
So when you say you objectively look at it,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes up,
The anger, yes.
whatever comes
Mm-hmm.
up,
Yes, of course.
sometimes you go on, try to see if you can acknowledge it
Hmm.
in a different way and see that maybe you're trying to solve it for yourself in that moment, but then you get involved. So how do you
Yes. So remember ultimately the goal of watching the anger come. The goal of watching whatever that strong emotion is that's going to take me over. The goal of watching that come is that I should realize it's not the master and I'm the slave. Otherwise, anger comes, I throw a temper tantrum like it's the master, I'm the slave. Desire comes, I give into it, it's the master, I'm the slave. That's the way that most of us work. And so the goal of watching it is the awareness that, look, there's anger, it's coming. And look, I'm still sitting here. I'm not shouting, I'm not screaming. I'm not turning all red in the face, but I'm also not suppressing it. I'm not telling myself anger is bad, don't be angry. I'm fully here, open and present with this emotion that's coming. I'm simply refusing to let it dictate how I act. I'm simply refusing to give it sovereignty over the kingdom of my life. I'm refusing to give it the steering wheel of the car of my life, whatever metaphor works for you. So I acknowledge it, yeah, I see it. And then as you said, if in seeing it and acknowledging it, some insight comes, well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. In that moment, because remember, that's not our typical meditation practice, in which it's just about let the thoughts go, don't attach to them. Here, if as you're watching the anger come, because you're not becoming the anger, it can tell us a lot of things. Sometimes it comes, and look at that, it takes the form of someone we recognize. Interestingly, sometimes someone other than the person we thought we were angry at. So, my colleague, my employee, the guy at the gas station, did something that made me furious. One way is I shout at him, I take it out on him. End of story. But the sanskara gets deeper. Another way, I sit, I watch that anger build. And as I watch it come, sometimes that anger starts to take the form. Sometimes it's a face, sometimes it's a shape, sometimes it's an image, sometimes it's even a scene of something completely unrelated to what this guy in the gas station just did. But it's my own subconscious showing me the true face of my anger. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a sibling, something from my childhood that has given me the sanskar of getting angry when people do what this guy just did. Because if I'm really that angry at someone I barely know, unless they've done something heinous and they're raping people and murdering people and doing, just objectively hideous things, chances are, if I'm that angry at them, it's because it has brought up something that has nothing to do with them. The vast majority of when we lose our temper has nothing to do with the present moment or the person in front of us. They've hit a sanskara in us, a place in us, a wound in us that has nothing to do with today. Which is why throwing a temper tantrum in the present moment at that person is useless. But if I can watch that anger come, sometimes it will show me its true face. And when that happens, it's beautiful. It's beautiful because in that moment, it's like the veil is gone and you realize, oh my God, yeah, of course. And you realize, I'm not angry at this guy. And you realize what created that sanskar. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. So if it does, feel free to introspect on that. Feel free to contemplate on that. Feel free to do anything other than give into the drama of the emotion in the present moment. So don't allow yourself to go into, he told me it was only $4.30 and I gave him a $5 bill and how dare that guy claim I didn't give him enough money and blah, blah, blah. Don't allow yourself to go into that drama. But if suddenly what appears is a different face of the anger, what it is that's actually made you so irate, what is that sanskar of being cheated? Not being believed. That this guy has just inadvertently, mistakenly, kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time, touched upon. Because that's where we grow. And that comes with all of the desires. Typically we give in to desires. I want to eat something, I eat it. I want to drink something, I drink it. I want to do something, I do it. I want to buy something, I buy it. But if we're actually able to watch our desires, very frequently they change shape also. So here I am, having this very, very strong desire for a big chocolate cake, right? But I'm not actually even physically that hungry. And if I allow myself to watch the desire for the chocolate cake, recognizing it's not my body. It's not my body saying it's been too long since I've eaten, I need food. Where's that desire coming? And I watch it. Very frequently also, that desire will change shape. And what I'll realize is, what I'm looking for is fullness. I'm looking for fulfillment. I'm looking for not feeling my boredom. I'm looking for not feeling my depression. I'm looking for love. I'm looking for companionship. I'm looking for all these things that too many of us fill ineffectively with food, with drink, with sex, with shopping. And so it's a wonderful practice that whatever comes up, an emotion, a desire, watch it. Watch it. So we're not denying, we're not repressing, we're not suppressing, we're acknowledging, we're watching. And yeah, sure, if in the watching, because sometimes the watching just makes it dissipate. Sometimes literally just looking at it, it vanishes right before your eyes. And sometimes it'll change shape. Sometimes it'll keep coming. And you just keep watching, keep sitting. Because you can outlast it. And that's where that beautiful, real inner strength comes. Is look, here's this anger, here's this lust, here's this greed, it's coming, it's building, and here I am just watching it. And I'm still here. And I haven't exploded or imploded or ceased to exist or died or all of the things that we feel like if I don't do that, I'm going to explode, or I'm going to die, or I'm going to... And what you find out is, look, I had that desire. Didn't give into it. I had a desire to punch that guy's lights out. Scream and yell. Eat something I shouldn't eat. Drink something I shouldn't drink. Engage in promiscuous sexual activities. Buy things I don't have the money to buy. Whatever it is, I had that desire. Here I keep sitting through it. And here I still am. And look at that. I didn't cease to exist. I didn't explode or implode. I didn't die. And like a wave, it builds, it builds, it builds, it builds, it builds, it builds, and then it crashes. And it's over. And you're on the other side. You know, I grew up in California, and I love the ocean. And when you go in the ocean, what you realize is what any child who's raised around the ocean learns at a very, very young age is what to do when waves come. Because the natural instinct, you can always tell on the beach, like who's there on holiday and they've never actually been to the beach before, or they haven't, swum in the ocean much compared to who knows how to swim in the ocean. Because what most people's initial instinct is to try to outrun the wave. So here you are swimming along and this wave comes and it's like, oh, and you turn around, I'm going to run to shore. But it never works. You can't get there before the wave does. And inevitably what ends up happening is you end up flat down on your face in the sand with this wave crashing down upon you. You've got a mouthful of sand or a mouthful of water. You're scared. And what you learn very quickly is when the wave comes, you turn around, you face it, and you dive into it. And then what happens is, in a very, very few seconds, the wave's gone its way, and here you are. And it didn't even impact you much. It only impacts you when you try to outrun it and it crashes on you. If you actually face it and dive into it, all right, what do you have? Show me your best stuff. I'm going to go deep. It just passes right over you. And you bob right up on the surface on the other side. And it's the same thing with the waves of our emotions. They only kill us when we try to outrun them. We try to deny them, try to repress them, try to suppress them. It never works. Just face it, watch it, dive deep. Yeah, Trish.
Continuing with the subject, so say you've been laying some new neural pathways and you do have a lot of insight, meditating, feeling a lot of peace, yada yada. Why do we sometimes then self-sabotage?
Ah, okay, great. So everything is going beautifully in our life. Even our spiritual life. Meditating, feeling peace. Why do we self-sabotage? We self-sabotage spiritually. Interestingly, for the same reason that we self-sabotage otherwise. A lot of people notice this in their lives. A lot of people will come in and they'll say, God, I don't know what it is. I work really hard for something. Things feel like they're just about to happen for me. And then something at that last minute, and it's just nothing works. And when you go really deep, what you realize is it's not that nothing works. It's that something in me is propelling me at the last minute to actually prevent that from happening. And so whether it's a career thing, a relationship thing, or a spiritual thing, the reason is actually the same. Because on a very deep level, I don't think I deserve it. On a very deep level, there is a part of me that says, and who the hell do you think you are to be successful? Who the hell do you think you are to be loved and to be in a healthy, good relationship? And who the hell do you think you are to feel peace? Enlightenment? No way, girl. That's for people who are much, much more deserving than you are. Maybe next life, you can come back as someone who's pure enough, who's good enough to deserve that. But not this life. And so we self-sabotage. And it's insidious. It literally because of course the thing with the ego is, the ego takes the form of any inner voice that we want it to. It's a good chameleon. And so the ego will come in and say, this spiritual path, it's not for you. Not for you. And it'll give you any reasons because the ego's very smart. It understands what's your thing. So either it'll say, you're too qualified for this. You're too smart. You could do so much more with your life. Or if that's your thing, or it'll say to you, this isn't going to go anywhere. You're worthless. Or it'll say to you, but what about that responsibility? It'll give you guilt. I mean, so whatever your thing is, the ego knows your buttons, and so it pushes your buttons very, very well. And if you're able to resist all of that, and you actually embark deeply on a spiritual path, the ego sadly doesn't say, all right, you win, I'm just going to, take a nap over here in the corner for the rest of your life. It keeps trying in different ways. And so here you are having this peace, and the ego is going to come in and start to sabotage it because it's scared, especially spiritually. Because what it feels is literally its reign is ending. Because the more deeply spiritually connected you get, the less reliant on your ego you are. So the ego comes in and says, you're worthless. And where you used to go, oh my God, yeah, you're right, I really am. Now you say, that's interesting. Okay, back to my breath. And the ego can't stand that. And then the ego comes in and says, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake. And you say, that's interesting. Okay, back to my breath. And the ego's like, what's going on here? And then the ego comes in and it says, sex, 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 sex. And you say, that's interesting. Go back to the breath. The ego's like, what? And then it comes in and it's going to keep doing its thing. Because the deeper that you go spiritually, the less of an impact it has. And you get to a point in your meditation where it's shouting, and you don't even have to say that's interesting, because it's shouting in a corner of your awareness that no longer even penetrates the peace. And it's like those scenes from those sort of B comedies where you've got, something like Satsang going on here, and through, on the other side of that window, you've got somebody screaming and, having a fit and beating on the windows, but we can't hear them. And it just drives them more crazy because we can't, maybe the glass is really thick or the room is soundproofed or whatever it is, but here we are having this beautiful moment. And there's the person suffering for whatever they're suffering from on the other side of the window. Maybe the dog has got its ankle, right? And the dog's trying to pull it down, and it's climbed up to the window, and it's banging on the window, screaming, screaming, screaming. And we can't hear it because we're in another world over here. And of course, that just makes it more irate. And that's what ends up starting to happen with the ego, is it starts to scream in a corner of your consciousness that isn't even able to penetrate when you're meditating. And that makes it even more livid. And so then it starts to work with you at times when you're not meditating. So it'll keep you up really late at night so that it's, you're too tired to get up, and this is, well, tomorrow, you really need your sleep. Got to sleep in a little bit tomorrow. And it'll do it slowly like that. Oh, this is really important to stay up for tonight. Oh, you've got to finish this. Oh, look at that cat video on Facebook, right? Whatever it may be. And before you know it, it's so late that when you go to set the alarm, the ego says, 5 hours? That's not enough. That's not good for you. Didn't you read that article? All right, it's okay. You won't meditate tomorrow. No problem. It never killed you. And slowly, 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 this is how it works. But it's all the game of the ego. And that's why it's so important to stay with it spiritually, but also to bring in that just little bit of sort of the psychological awareness that says, I'm not going to buy this. Just because you're over there in your corner shouting, not worthy, not worthy, not worthy, I don't have to buy it. I see you, I hear you, but no, I'm not prepared to debate you. I've got better things to do with my life. And I'm so sorry that you feel not worthy. And yes, I've done enough psychoanalysis to understand why you feel not worthy. I know all that. And if what you want is a hug, come over here, crawl in my lap. I'm perfectly happy to give you a hug and to help you feel worthy. But you're no longer running the show here because you're not speaking the truth. And then you go back to what you know you need to do. And slowly, 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 that voice gets quieter. For a while, then something will happen in life. Someone you love will die. You'll get a scare. Something will happen. And you'll get triggered again. And then it'll start doing its thing again. You'll bring it back. But whatever way you find yourself self-sabotaging, it's so important to realize you're doing this to yourself. Your mind is doing this to yourself because on some level, you're afraid of the success. Because the ego within you doesn't think you deserve it. And that's an essential aspect to address. And this is where I feel that psychology intersects with spirituality on such an important level, because if I can't address the part of me that says not worthy, I'm going to have to keep fighting that self-sabotaging instinct over and over again. Whereas if I can address it successfully, I can actually find some freedom from that. Wonderful. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. And we will not have satsang tomorrow because tomorrow we have a very special celebration for Puja Swamiji's birthday. Immediately following the Aarti, there will be a beautiful dance drama done on the ghat. We'll stay there right after Aarti of Puja Swamiji's life. So that'll go from right after Aarti for, I think it's an hour, maybe an hour and a half or so. So it'll go straight into dinner. And we will regather day after tomorrow.